The Athletics' Josh Robbins reports that it's a long shot, but Zion Williamson to DC is something that might be worth monitoring ahead of the trade deadline. Could this actually happen? Let's talk to Greg Finberg today about it.
You are Locked On Wizards, your daily Washington Wizards podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
DC family, you are locked on to the Washington Wizards, where you're part of our family. We thank you for making Locked On Wizards your first listen every single day. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every single day. Alongside the DC sports content creating savant Abdullah Ayubi, I'm Ben Strober, and I cover the Washington Wizards for Roundtable IO. And today joining us, a frequent of the program at this point, Greg Finberg from Bullets Forever, also the host of the Wizards podcast, where he gave a really detailed breakdown of what the details of this trade could exactly look like for Washington if it were to happen, although it is a long shot right now. So I recommend you go check that out if you want even more minute details than we'll give you today, because we're going to have a little bit more fun with this conversation, I think. But Greg, what's up? How you doing, man?
What's up, Ben? What's up, AB? Good to be back. Always nice to be with you guys on the show. Like you mentioned, Ben, it's still preliminary talks. It seems like, based on Josh's reporting, it's a long shot for the Wizards to land Zion. But I think it's fun to talk about, and that's why I talked about it yesterday. And I'm even more excited to talk about it with you guys to kind of see what you guys think about a potential trade.
Yeah, on today's show, we just kind of break down how realistic this trade actually is, why it might not be as risky as people think, because there's some details in Zion's contract that maybe a lot of people aren't aware of, and what would even be the motive to do this exactly. AB, what's up, dude?
This is exciting, guys. Zion Williamson, I already seen people complain about it, brought up Mumbo Sauce on Twitter. It's going to be fun.
Oh, my God. So it honestly pains me to say this, and I'll just give you my opinion on it right now. I don't want the Wizards to make this trade, and this pains me to say because I was the biggest Zion believer for so many years. After he was drafted in 2019, I remember I'd always tell everybody, if I had to bet on anybody being the best player in the league 5 years from now, it was always going to come back to Zion Williamson. I thought he was unstoppable. And to his credit, when he's on the floor, he kind of is unstoppable. He's really good. There's a reason they scored like 30 points against us, I think, a couple of weeks ago. And since he's actually been healthy, he's been really hard to stop in this league. However, he misses, I think, 56% of the games that he's been on the team or been in the league this year, or not this year, for his whole career. So he's just not on the floor consistently, and I know he's got some issues off the court as well that are a little bit troublesome. So it does pain me to say I don't want this move to happen, Greg, although I was such a big believer in him for a long time. So I want to get where you stand on the whole thing just from the start.
I think we're in a pretty similar boat. Like, I talked at length about why I could get behind a trade and also why I couldn't get behind the trade. Like, I can understand both sides. I lean more so to the I don't think they should do this, just because, like, you're in a really good spot in your rebuild. Like, you just spent 3 years tearing down what the old front office did, which was make moves similar to this, where you're getting another team's star player after he was this big star player. Like, you're sort of thinking you're buying low on this guy when realistically he showed you who he is. He showed you that he can stay healthy. He showed you that he has some off the court issues, and he showed you that when he's right, he's right and he's really good. But that's few and far between. He's making a lot of money. And in the past, you've seen the Wizards sort of make deals like this. This one's a little bit different just because I think his value where it's at now, it wouldn't take much to get him. And I guess we'll probably later talk about what a trade package could look like. It's a similar thing sort of to Trey Young, where yes, 2-3 years ago, you'd be mortgaging your team's future if you wanted to acquire a player of his caliber. And now you're talking about Zion. 2-3 years ago, you would have to give 4 firsts, 4 swaps and all of that. But that's not the case anymore. And so I think, like Ben mentioned, the Wizards just don't have to do this. Like, they are in a really good spot. You have your past 3 drafts that all look really good. I mean, Alex Sarr just scored 28 points, and that's pretty standard for him at this point. Trey Johnson looks like a really good pick. Same with Will Riley, who's contributed. That whole 2024 draft class, I mean, Sarr and Keyshawn are 2 of the top 3 points per game leaders from the 2024 draft class this season. Bob Carrington's had his up moments, his down moments, but had another good game with 17 points in the latest loss. Like your draft class is starting to develop. You're in a good spot in your rebuild. You probably keep your pick this year. And with all of that, you're going to try to compete next year with Trey Young probably back. And you can kind of evaluate your roster at that point. You don't need to take on more contracts. You don't need to take another 2 years on of Zion's deal. So timing wise, I wouldn't understand why the Wizards feel they need to do this. Now, if Will Dawkins, Travis Schlenk, Michael Winger, they really believe that Zion could be a big piece here, and they believe value wise, they're buying extremely low on a very, very, very talented player, then I get it, especially if the value is there. But if it's me, like Ben mentioned, this isn't a trade I'm seeking, and it's probably not even a trade that I'm making, even if it doesn't cost you too much.
I'm gonna play devil's advocate, guys. I love Zion Williamson, and like Ben said, I was a big fan of him coming out of Duke. Just very explosive. We all remember when he blew out his shoe, and it was just the things that he was doing, and the first overall pick. And I think when it comes to trading for him, it just reminds me of Trey Young, where if the price is so low, why not? We have the high ground. Shout out to our Fortnite enthusiasts. The Pelicans want to get rid of him, guys. It's like you mentioned, Greg. It's 4 or 5 years ago where you're asking for 4, 5 first-round picks for a guy that's super talented. And I mean, for me, Trey Young plus Zion Williamson in DC, obviously we'll get butts in seats. Do you think the idea of him potentially ruining the development of the young core is in play, even though it's year 3 of a rebuild? Because I think potentially a front court of him and Sarr. Now I know there's Boozer, DeBonds, I understand that, but and also him missing games. I mean, that's not that bad for the second half of the season because we want to keep our draft pick. So just the idea of him affecting the young core. What are your thoughts on that, Greg?
I think it's a valid take. I think a lot of people have those fears with Trey Young, where he's pretty ball dominant, and you're going to be moving a guy like Bub Carrington to that bench point guard role. Trey Johnson will be more off ball. Keyshawn George will be more off ball. And that probably helps a guy like Alex Sarr, who's getting spoon fed in the pick and roll. It probably helps a guy like Trey Johnson, who's just allowed to space the floor, be a shooter, and occasionally put it on the deck. He doesn't have to do too much. So I can understand that with Trey Young, it's not as big of an issue because he actually sets the table. A guy like Zion kind of needs the ball, and he needs it at certain positions on the floor. He really can't shoot. How does that affect the spacing? Will Dawkins has been pretty adamant that whoever he drafts needs to be able to knock down the 3 ball. That's been a staple in his evaluation. They need to be able to defend both sides, which again was a gripe with the Trey Young trade, where he's one of the worst defenders in the NBA. But Will Dawkins seemingly thinks that he needs his offense more than he probably needs to rely on his defense. And so it's pretty much an evaluation thing on Dawkins. Like, he knows best where these guys are at in their development. He knows best what they need. And if you put Zion in, he would probably start. I mean, he's coming off the bench for the Pelicans some games, but at that cap figure, if you have to give up some draft capital to get him here, I doubt he comes off the bench. And so, like you mentioned, I don't mind if that's the pairing with him and Sarr in the front court. You got a big that can, defend the rim and can shoot. And you got another power forward that can't defend the rim, can't shoot, but can really do everything else well and probably better than Alex can. And so I think they complement each other well. But then you got to say, well, what does that do for a guy like Keyshawn George, who might be your future 4? Does that move him to the 3? And then you got Bilal and Trey, who starts at the 2. Is there enough spacing in your starting lineup if you go with both Bilal and Zion, who can't shoot? And again, this is going into the weeds of a trade that, like we mentioned at the beginning, Ben said is a long shot. But if they do acquire him, those are just the starting lineup issues. And then you got to think about, well, that top 8 protected pick, one would assume they're just going to take best player available. Let's say you take a guy like Boozer, who's a true power forward and a really, really talented player. What do you do with him? Is he now sitting behind Zion? And it's a good problem to have too much talent. I think that's way better, obviously, than not having enough at this point in a rebuild. But like I mentioned at the start, I don't think it's a move they need to make. I would get behind it if they did, because I get it. I get the appeal. Ted Leonsis would love it because, like you mentioned, it'll get fans to games. Same with Trey Young. But development-wise, I don't think it would hinder it. I don't think it would help it either. And I don't think that the Wizards need to do anything at the moment that could hinder the development, especially when they put 3 years into this rebuild. I don't think this is a move that has to happen.
Yeah, I'd agree with you, Greg. I just want to give out some details here before we get to our break. So, as you reported, or not even reported, as you broke down in your podcast, most or a lot of this contract is not guaranteed. So Wizards would be on the books for $42 million, then $44 million the following year, but a lot of that is non-guaranteed. He has to play at least 50% of the games. to get 40% of that salary this year. So I think he's at 29 right now, if I'm not mistaken. So he's getting close to getting at least 40% of the salary, which would be like 16.8 million or something like that. And then those same non-guarantee things exist in the following year of the contract. So the Wizards could essentially get out of the contract after only like 20 million of it is guaranteed after the next season, which is interesting. Then there's also some weight restrictions that are part of this contract. Like, dog, this dude has 20% of his salary get guaranteed if he passes his six of them weigh-in checkpoints during last year. This guy had such an issue controlling the weight that they made weigh-in checkpoints for Zion Williamson, which I think it's insane. It almost reminds me of like Kyler Murray, like making sure he didn't play Call of Duty too much and like actually watched his film. Like, what are we doing here? But it's just something funny to think about. All right, let's take a quick break. When we come back, we continue to weigh in on what the possibilities are of a Zion Williamson trade to DC. Tax season doesn't have to take over your life. This year, TurboTax is making it easier than ever to just hand things off and move on with your day. With TurboTax Full Service, you can have your taxes done for you by a trusted local expert, start to finish without the stress or guesswork. Instead of spending hours trying to figure out forms, you can meet with a local TurboTax expert online, or you can connect in person. They handle everything from W-2s to self-employment forms and work to get you every deduction. You can upload your documents, go about your day, and get updates right in the TurboTax app. It's a huge time saver, and it gives a real peace of mind knowing that an expert is handling your taxes. For a limited time, you can have your taxes done by a local TurboTax expert for just $150. All if a TurboTax expert didn't file for you last year. Just file by February 28th. Take taxes off your plate and get back to your life. Visit TurboTax.com to book your appointment today. One more quick comment on the Zion weight stuff. There was so much commentary around him, and like I don't want to come off as like shaming the guy because there was a lot of genuine commentary that existed around Zion Williamson when I think he was at his heaviest, where genuinely reporters were fat shaming the guy, and it was a little bit absurd. So I'm not trying to like fat shame Zion Williamson or anything like that. I just worried that he could run into similar issues because like I get it, man. Like some people just have a hard time controlling their weight, and that's been a big reason why he hasn't been able to stay healthy. So I think it's a legitimate concern to worry about here. Now, Greg, back to the points you were bringing up. It makes a lot of sense that the Wizards could want to upgrade at the power forward position. Obviously, they haven't run double big like much, if at all, this year, which is probably by design because I think they would be a lot better defensively. They would rebound a lot better if they had multiple bigs out there at once. So that's why we don't see it. If you are trying to be more competitive next year and win some more games, I think it makes a lot of sense to pair somebody alongside Alex Sarr. Now, if you don't get that in the draft in Boozer, where are your options here? Like, couldn't the Wizards theoretically do a little bargain bin shopping and go in free agency and get somebody that could actually help them out, like a Mitchell Robinson or even anybody else at this point? Like, I don't think you have to go and make this move and get Zion to be that guy.
I mean, yeah, I said this a bunch throughout my pod. The only reason the Wizards do this is if their front office genuinely believes like Zion is much better than what the Pelicans are allowing him to do, and in their system and with their medical staff, that they think that buying low for him not only is there, and you mentioned with the contract, like there's not much downside, contractually, and they're not going to be depleted like the Knicks might be with the 4 unprotected ones they traded for Mikal Bridges. Like it wouldn't be a trade like that at all. And so the downside isn't too bad, but the Wizards would trade for him with that in mind. Like he's not working out there, but that's because the Pelicans organization is not good. It's a dumpster fire. Versus our new organization, our culture, we think that we can put him in here and he can play really well next to Sarr. And if it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out. That's fine. But if it does, then we look like geniuses when we're buying low. So that's the only way the Wizards would do this. If they don't think that, then there's no reason to bail the Pelicans out. And I mentioned this, it's got to be a two-way street. Like maybe the Wizards are interested, but the Pelicans know that the Wizards aren't going to trade them a future one. That's not like the 30th pick in this year's draft that they have via OKC. Like they're not going to get that type of package here. They're not going to get one of their, previous draft picks in the last 3 years. Like this is going to be a strict salary dump for the Pelicans. And the Wizards with Middleton's contract are probably the best suitor for that. If they just say, hey, we don't even want to deal with the last 2 years at 40 plus million for Zion, let's get off his contract right now. Because if they're looking for a big package, the Wizards are not the team. But if they are and they meet together and Wizards want Zion, the Pelicans want to get off the contract, it's perfect. If the Wizards don't want Zion, they don't really believe in him like that, then why would you make this trade? Like you mentioned, Ben, there are free agents, I'm sure, that will be on the market. I think getting a power forward that fits pretty well next to Sarr, that's if the Wizards view Key as more of a 3 instead of a 4. That makes sense, right? You saw with the Pistons, like a couple smart trades and a couple signings like Tim Hardaway Jr., Tobias Harris, like that can take a team from, bottom of the barrel to contender status into the playoffs. And look at the Pistons now. They're the number 1 seed in the East right now through 42 games. So I think that's another thing where the Wizards, like you mentioned, Ben, they don't need to do this. Like they aren't the desperate team that wants to get off a big contract. They used to be that team with Bradley Beal and you had Trevor Ariza here and all those contracts. But now they're the teams that can take that back if you pay them right or if the value is right. And so if you're the Wizards, you don't have to do this if you don't want Zion. And also, you have the pick that's top 8 protected. They're going to get that pick. They're going to keep it. What's stopping them from just saying, hey, look, let's not make this trade. If we get lucky and we're a top 3 team, we can just fill that spot with the Banso or we can fill it with Boozer if that's granted that maybe Peterson or the other one is gone. And then you are paying that guy a rookie salary. You hold on to the 30th pick. You just let Middleton expire or buy him out. And now you're not on $40+ million worth of Zion. Good contract, guaranteed money or not. So like I said, the Wizards don't need to make this move. They're in a great position in their rebuild. I feel like this is a move that you make if you're a little bit desperate, if the rebuild isn't going the way that you want a year or two down the line. Maybe it's what you do. But there's no point in making it now because they can just get a really good player in the draft and not be on the books for $40+ million for 2 years for a guy that, like Ben mentioned, I think has played over 70 games one time in 6 seasons, above 65 one time in 6 seasons, knee injuries, foot injuries, weight issues. Like he's kind of showed who he is. The Wizards taking a gamble on him now, I think, is a stupid bet. And maybe it pays off if they do it and they look smart, but I'd wager they probably wouldn't look smart based on what you've seen. That's why I wouldn't do it.
Yeah, no, you brought up a lot of good points, Greg. It is buy low, and it's just for me, I want to think of it through a different lens where maybe it's an insurance case where hypothetically you get the 6th overall pick again and you miss out on Wilson, Boozer, DeBonza, and Peterson. It's a possibility, guys. That happened not too long ago, and maybe Zion could be your forward. What the idea of pairing up Middleton and that draft pick, I just think that first round pick that's going to be OKC, it's going to be pick 30-29. I don't know why people hold so much weight to it, Greg. I don't think it's worth that much, to be honest. And it's hard to find a star at that pick. I think if you're a Wizards fan, if you somehow land Zion with just giving a Middleton and that pick, that's another steal for Dawkins, correct?
I mean, it's tremendous value. And I mentioned this yesterday, like the Wizards got that pick from Philly last deadline because they traded Jared Butler. They took back the Reggie Jackson contract and bought him out. So if you're a Wizards fan and like, let's say you are for Zion and the Wizards like Zion, and you would say, hey, here's Jared Butler and Chris Middleton for Zion Williamson, you would probably say yes a million times out of 10. But it comes back to like value can be so good, but it has to be the right move for the right team at the right time. Again, like if you're the Sixers and you're trying to contend and you can give up Paul George and, another pick that's late round for Zion, like you do that all the time. But the Wizards aren't in that same position. They're much different than that position. And this is a move that could potentially derail the last 3 years of work that you had put in. I don't think it would if you made it, even if it was a disaster. It's only $17.6 million guaranteed if he plays 41 games in 27-28. Like, it's fine. But again, it's value is one thing, but the value has to also fit your team. And I don't know, even if you get tremendous value, if this is the right move for them to make at this time.
It's so funny to think about like where this Wizards organization has gotten to, because you said the point, like the Pelicans are a disastrous organization and we think we're a good organization now and we can fix certain things in a player, when back in those days it was like, oh, you have problems? Come here. Like we can make those problems worse for you and we can make our team worse. But it is interesting that like now we can have a little bit of confidence that if the Wizards did make a move like this, that maybe there would be some more foresight used behind it, and maybe like it would seem surface level like a stupid move, as we've said, but maybe it's genius at the end of the day. And I'm not saying like that's always the possibility, because even good executives in this league will make bad decisions. Like it's bound to happen. People can already argue that this front office made a bad decision to trade Denny. Like whether or not people believe that, like it's up for debate. So that's just how it is. Like I don't think you can judge every move to say how good a front office is, but it's about like what you do overall. So I'd be interested to see how this shapes up going forward and like how the Wizards would approach it if it even becomes a real possibility. Like we said, it's a long shot, but we'll have to see. All right, when we come back, I want to get into a little bit more broader Wizard stuff. Trey Johnson, not on the rookie ladder, so we can talk about that with Greg when we come back. New year, new systems. This is the time when a lot of us look at the messier parts of how we run our business and think there has to be a better way. And there is. Streamlining your communications is one of the quickest upgrades you can make. And that's why today's episode is brought to you by Quo, spelled Quo, the smarter way to run your business communications. Because when your team is reachable, organized, and communicating in one place, you're not just working cleaner, you're creating more opportunities to connect with customers. I love how simple Quo makes everything. Your whole team can call and text from a shared business number, so nothing gets missed. Everyone sees the full conversation thread, which makes replies faster and more personal. It works right from your phone or computer, and you can even keep your existing number. And Quo's smart AI tools automatically log calls, summarize those conversations, and highlight next steps so details will never slip through the cracks. No surprise, Quo is the #1 rated business phone system on G2, and it's trusted by more than 90,000 businesses, from solo operators to growing teams. Make this year where no opportunity and no customer slips away. Try Quo for free. Plus, get 20% off your first 6 months when you go to quo.com/LockedOnNBA. That's QUO.com/LockedOnNBA. Quo. No missed calls, no missed customers. We had a conversation off air, Greg, because I told you I was looking at Trey Johnson's stats over the last couple weeks or so, and I said, NBA Kia rookie ladder just came out, and this guy's not even on the top 10. And you kind of had an explanation of why that might be, so I want to get your take on it. Trey Johnson is not in the top 10. I think it's ridiculous, even with the explanation you provided to me, but that's just how I'm feeling. I want to hear what you think.
I mean, I would assume I don't know how recent they base the rankings off of. I think it's a weekly thing. Like he had a 1 for 10 shooting game with 4 points against Denver. He did follow that with 15 on 50% from the field, 43% from 3, and 5 assists, which was a career high against the Clippers. Before that, 18 points. So again, like if this is a weekly thing, 10 points before that, 19 before that. Like I don't know why you would put a guy like Maxime Reynaud on the list at 6 above him. Again, like he's been fine for the Kings, but like if you're looking at statistically, Trey Johnson's been better. I think Trey Johnson's been asked to do a little bit more for the Wizards, especially when he'd been starting for the most part, and has been starting for the last couple games. I don't know why you would put him that much higher. Again, like Dylan Harper has been struggling. He's at 10. He wasn't ranked. Caleb Love for the Blazers, again, like he's been better than I think people expected him to be, and maybe the expectations are why they think he's so high. I mean, I certainly think Trey Johnson has been a top 10 rookie this season, but clearly the NBA ladder doesn't, and maybe it's because he shot 1 of 10, but every rookie does. So maybe that's the case for Trey, but I don't know. I think he's a top 10 rookie. I've been actually pleasantly surprised with him.
Igor Demen, Greg, I don't even remember him playing at all at the beginning of the season. I think maybe it's just the hatred towards the Washington Wizards. If you were to put him, if it was your list, I think he would. Is it crazy to say I would put him right after Derek Queen? I mean, Cedric Howard. I just like some of these guys. It just doesn't make any sense. And obviously, people probably don't mention the fact that he missed some time due to the hip injury and the minute restriction. And I do expect his usage to go up post trade deadline. Do you see him creeping up into the top 5 or 7 by the end of the year?
You're talking about Trey Johnson?
Yeah.
I mean, I think it's possible. Again, based on their stats now, I think Trey Johnson's been playing the best basketball of his career, with the exception of the Denver game. I mean, he's not top 10. So I don't know if he has to average 5 to 7 more points per game, or he needs to have higher usage. I don't know what they are looking at. But I mean, Caleb Love, if I'm looking at the list right, is that at 8. Trey Johnson's averaging more points than him. He's shooting 8% better from 3. He's shooting 5% better from the field. I mean, Caleb Love's at like 75% from the line. Trey Johnson's at nearly 90% from the line. Pretty similar rebounds, assists. I mean, if we're looking statistically, I don't watch much Blazers games, but I don't know how one could be ranked 8 and one's outside the top 10. But the good news is that the key of rookie ladder means nothing. And it does not mean that Trey Johnson is worse or playing worse than Caleb Love or Reno or anything. It's one guy who wrote the story's opinion. Respect to him. He's entitled to his opinion. I just respectfully disagree. And I think Trey's been very good. And we'll see when like the all rookie teams come out at the end of the year. But I mean, Bub Carrington made it last year. Alex Sarr made it last year. That's 2 Wizards. So I think they'll probably get one this year. I think Trey will be a top 10 rookie based on the voting. But again, there's half the season left. And like you mentioned, AB, his role will pick up post deadline. His production ideally will follow suit. And so hopefully that's what you start to see.
So, Greg, 7 losses in a row for this Wizards team after they rattled off 7 of their last 12 previously from that time span. And the first 5 were all losses by double digits. I don't necessarily think they were blowouts, though. They were like semi-competitive. The last 2, though, 6-point loss to Denver, 4-point loss to the Clippers that have won, I think, 12 or 13 of their last 15 games. So that's a surging team out there in the West. Are the Wizards kind of past the point of their rebuild where they're getting blown out consistently? I almost feel like I said a while back after the streak came to an end, I said, I feel like we're past that point of the rebuild where we're losing games consistently by that much. I think it'll still happen a couple more times this year for sure. But the way this team has played and the way they develop, do you see them kind of has turned the corner as where they are?
I think that's why I tried to tell Wizards fans to enjoy that like 12-game stretch, because you knew that they wouldn't allow that to happen for much longer. You knew, like, with the top 8 protected pick, like if they don't have the top 8 protected pick, I think you might be seeing some more competitive games. Like, I think that is the most important thing clearly for this team. So again, I think they are past it, but I saw enough during that stretch to say, like, okay, I think this team kind of has what it takes to maybe take a step next year. If they have the same core, they keep their pick, they maybe bring in another free agent, they extend, or Trey opts into his contract. They showed me enough there to where, like, yeah, you don't want to be getting blown out. Like the Sacramento game being non-competitive for the most part, that's not what you want at this point in the rebuild. The Pelicans lost, losing by 20 plus at home to another team who also has 10 wins through half the season. Those aren't what you want result-wise, but they're losing games, and I think that's what they want. Like the players aren't playing to lose, but I think ideally to keep the pick, it's what you want. So like whether it's ugly or not, I think they just want to get to the finish line. They want to get to the end as a bottom 4 team, ideally as the worst team, so that they can't fall further than the 5th pick. Like if they get, the 5th pick, that sucks. If they get the 4th pick, but Caleb Wilson is very good. And apart from the consensus top 3, that's a great pick. There's other guys in college basketball at the guard position, like Christian Anderson, who's been playing really well. You have a bunch of players that they could get, even if they don't get lucky, which based on results, it might not happen. And so I think they just want to be bad record-wise. And you don't want to be losing these games at this point. But I think I saw enough during that stretch to where I'm understanding of it and I know why they're doing it. And it's not necessarily reflective of the talent isn't there, because we saw that it is. It's reflective of what they need to do, and that's keep the pick.
We talked about Zion Williamson potentially coming here to DC earlier, and I ultimately don't think it's going to happen. I wanted to ask you, Greg, right before we leave, the trade deadline coming up, is there any candidates that you see the Wizards moving, or do you think the Trae Young trade is the only move?
I mean, it's similar to the CJ trade. Like McCollum's contract is basically just here's an expiring deal if you want to get off bad money. But that's another thing of, based on the player you're giving me back, the Wizards might get paid to do so. You saw how good the Marcus Smart trade looked last deadline, where they were able to get him and trade Bagley and Johnny Davis, who Johnny Davis wasn't going to work here with the new front office. And they were eventually able to get the 18th pick, which they traded and got Will Riley. And that turned to, I think, a total of 4 second-round picks. They re-signed Bagley right after. They bought out Smart. You got Will Riley. And that looks, obviously, now like a tremendous trade. So maybe that's what they try to do, because they still have cap space, even if they pay Trey Young. They need to get to a salary cap floor. And so they have the ability to take back a bad contract if another team's willing to pay them to do so. So that's another thing they could look to do. And that's the only reason I think Middleton would get dealt. Maybe he gets bought out if they can't find a deal. We saw them do that with Blake Wesley. We saw them do that with Marcus Smart, with Reggie Jackson last deadline. So that's a possibility as well. They just applied for a disabled player exemption for Cam Whitmore, so they can sign somebody if they want to half of his salary to an expiring deal. They have the open roster spot because they went 2-for-1 in the Trey Young trade, so they can fill that by taking back another player on another contract. In that, cleared $13 million in cap space for the next 4 years with Corey Kispert, so they could also trade or take back more money at the deadline. Apart from that, I don't think any of their draft picks recently will get dealt. I doubt a guy like AJ Johnson or Malachi Branham, guys at the end of the bench, don't make sense. I didn't think last year's deadline would be too active, and they made multiple moves to bring in future draft assets and take on bad contracts. So that seems like, if I had to wager, that would be my guess, is they continue to try to accumulate and stockpile those assets. Do they have the same resources like they did last year with Kyle Kuzma? No. But the Middleton contract's an expiring, they can deal. And I think that's the moves that they'll probably try to make.
I think you're muted, Ben.
My computer sucks.
No,
My
you're
computer
good.
is so ass, and it's hard to get the mic up. But Greg, astute analysis as always. Be sure to check him out, everybody, on Twitter at Greg Finberg. Check out his work for Bullets Forever, and also check out the Wizards podcast if you want even more in-depth analysis about the possibility of Zion Williamson to DC. Let us know in the comments below if you're a fan of the idea like AB, or if you're against it like me. So just let us know below. But Greg, thanks for joining as always, my friend.
Thanks for having me, Ben. Appreciate you as always. Appreciate you, AB, for allowing me to come on. Always a pleasure. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe, because the podcast is awesome. I think you do 4 or 5 shows a week.
We do 5, but
5.
Ever since Trey Young thing, it's been 7 or 8.
Yeah, they do awesome work. They grind. So be sure to support and check them out. They do awesome work. But thanks again, guys.
Appreciate that,
it,
Greg.
man.
All right, everybody. Thanks for tuning in to Locked On Wizards for today. Tomorrow we'll have the post-game show for you, Wizards and Nuggets from Capital One Arena. We will be live out on site for it, so make sure you subscribe and follow the podcast so you get all of the latest episodes. You can find us on X as well. This X handle for you here is just Locked On Wizards. If you never miss an episode, the Everydayer Club is built for you. Get Locked On Wizards ad-free, plus members-only Discord access, and more. Head to LockedOnWizardsSupercast.com to join the club. For those of you on video, we send you the first ever 24/7 National NBA YouTube channel on audio. Make sure you make your second listen NBA Game Night on Locked On NBA. For Greg Finberg, our guest today, my co-host Abdullah Ayubi, I'm Ben Strober. We're out of here.